What if I told you that Oscar Piastri's crash at his own Australian Grand Prix wasn't simply driver error, but the result of something McLaren didn't expect to see in its car? Because what seemed like an absurd failure before the race even began, in reality hid a dangerous combination of factors that were only discovered later when analyzing the data. On the reconnaissance lap, just as Piastri accelerated out of turn 4, the car lost its rear end violently and ended up against the wall, falling out of its own race before the lights went out. But this is where the story gets really disturbing. When Andrea Stella and McLaren engineers reviewed the telemetry after the Grand Prix, they found something that didn't fit the simple explanation of cold tires or driver error. In fact, the data showed a much more aggressive reaction from the car than Piastri himself expected when applying the accelerator, something that neither the driver nor the team had anticipated at the time. The question then is inevitable. What exactly happened inside the McLaren at that moment? And why was Stella himself shocked when he saw what had really caused the crash? The Australian Grand Prix always has something special. Not only because it is the race that opens many Formula One seasons, but because the Albert Park circuit usually offers a unique atmosphere, with thousands of fans filling the stands and enormous pressure on the drivers. But for Oscar Piastri, that pressure was even greater. It wasn't just another race on the calendar. It was his home, his audience, and his opportunity to shine in front of an entire country that hoped to see him fight for something great. Before the race even started, before the traffic lights went out, and before the cars launched the first official lap of the Grand Prix, Piastri's weekend ended abruptly. During the reconnaissance lap towards the grid, at a time when drivers normally drive with extreme caution, the McLaren lost control in a completely unexpected way. The exact moment occurred at the exit of turn 4. Piastri began to apply the accelerator as he would on any other preparation lap, without pushing the car too much, without risking anything. But in a matter of milliseconds, the behavior of the car changed completely. The rear of the McLaren came off violently, the car turned abruptly, and the Australian ended up hitting the wall with the right front part of the car. The blow was enough to destroy the suspension and leave the car completely damaged. There was no possibility of quick repair. The team quickly confirmed that the car would not be able to return to the track. Piastri's home race was over before it even began. The silence inside the McLaren garage was evident. What should have been one of the most special moments of the year for the Australian driver had turned into one of the toughest images of the weekend. Piastri had not even been able to line up on the grid. Everything had ended in a simple reconnaissance tour. And the strangest thing of all was that, at first glance, the accident did not have a completely clear explanation. The replays showed something that immediately caught the attention of analysts. It didn't look like a typical spin caused by overthrottle, nor was it a progressive loss of control that would give the pilot time to correct. It was something much more sudden. A sudden, almost instantaneous movement, as if the car had received an unexpected burst of power just at the most delicate moment. That detail made the questions begin to multiply within the paddock. Because the drivers know perfectly well the risk of driving with cold tires on a formation lap. That's why they tend to be extremely conservative at that time. Nobody wants to make a mistake before the race starts, much less in dry conditions and with a driver as precise as Piastri at the wheel. However, within McLaren they soon realized that something did not quite fit the simplest explanation. As the team began reviewing the information recorded by the car, the engineers began analyzing every detail of the telemetry. They wanted to understand exactly what had happened in those seconds before impact. And it was during that analysis that Andrea Stella began to notice something she didn't expect to find. Because the data suggested that the car had reacted more aggressively than the driver himself had anticipated at the time. And that opened up a disturbing possibility. Maybe the accident hadn't simply been a mistake. Maybe there was something else behind that hit that had knocked Piastri out of his own race. And when Stella finished reviewing all the data, what she discovered left the team completely surprised. After the accident, while the cameras continued to show the image of the destroyed McLaren in the Albert Park escape, a much quieter but infinitely more important process began inside the team's garage, understanding what had really happened. That's exactly what McLaren did. Andrea Stella and the group of engineers began to reconstruct, second by second, what happened at the exit of turn 4. They wanted to see exactly when the car had lost stability. At first, the explanation seemed relatively logical. The tires were cold. That means the available grip was much less than under normal conditions. In addition, the car had gone slightly over the edge of the corner, something that always reduces traction a little at the exit. But as they progressed in the analysis, something appeared that didn't quite fit. The data showed that the car was within completely normal parameters just before Piastri applied the accelerator. There was no obvious excess speed. There was no strange steering angle. There was also no obvious error in the layout. Everything seemed perfectly controlled. When the driver began to open the throttle, the car delivered a much more aggressive burst of power than expected for that situation. As Piastri himself later explained, the car generated an unexpected boost of torque just at the moment when the driver began to accelerate, something that he did not anticipate, taking into account the temperature of the tires and the way the car normally responds in those conditions. That small detail completely changed the reading of the accident. Because in a modern Formula One car, the way power is delivered is extremely important. It's not just about how much power the engine produces, but how that power is released at each moment. Hybrid systems, electronic management, and engine maps determine exactly how torque is transmitted to the rear wheels. If that delivery is too aggressive when the tires are not yet warm enough, the result can be immediate: loss of traction. That's exactly what the McLaren data suggests. The moment Piastri began to accelerate, the car released more torque than the rear axle could handle in those conditions. With the tires still outside their optimal window and with the car passing over a slightly uneven area of asphalt, the grip suddenly disappeared. The rear part dropped violently and the car reacted with a brutal snap, a whiplash so fast that it left practically no room to correct. That type of loss of control is one of the most difficult scenarios for any pilot. It is not a progressive loss that can be anticipated. It is a sudden break in the balance of the car. And that was when Stella understood that the accident was not as simple as it seemed. Because the team's internal analysis showed that it had not been a single mistake. It had been a chain of factors that coincided at exactly the worst possible time. Cold tires, passage through the curb, a more aggressive power delivery than expected, and a moment on the circuit where the grip was already delicate. All of this came together in just a few tenths of a second. But the most surprising thing is that even within the team itself, no one expected the car to react that way at that point on the track. And that forced McLaren to review something much deeper than a simple driving error. Because if power delivery could generate such abrupt behavior in a relatively controlled situation, then there was a much more important question to answer. Was it simply a specific circumstance? Or was the car hiding behavior that could reappear in other races? And that question was what led the team to investigate even further what had really happened in that McLaren before the impact. When Andrea Stella finished reviewing all the data on the accident, the conclusion was much more disturbing than many imagined at the time. Oscar Piastri's crash had not simply been driver error or a typical cold tire situation. What the engineers found in the telemetry revealed that the car's behavior had been more unpredictable than the team itself expected. In Formula One, one of the biggest fears of any engineer is that a car has a behavior window that is too narrow. That means the car can be extremely fast when everything is just right, but it can also become extremely difficult to control when some variable strays slightly outside that ideal range. And that was exactly what began to worry within McLaren. The data showed that the car's power delivery at that time had been too aggressive for the road conditions and the actual tire temperature. When Piastri opened the throttle, the system released a boost of torque that the rear axle could not handle at that instant. The result was an immediate loss of traction that caused the car to whip and subsequently impact against the wall. But what was truly shocking for Stella was realizing something else. It wasn't just a question of the timing of the accident. It was a sign that the car could react extremely sensitively when several variables coincided at the same time. Cold tires, changes in the asphalt surface, passing through a curb, and overly aggressive power delivery could create a situation in which the driver had practically no room for reaction. That set off an immediate alarm within the team. Because if something like this could happen on a simple reconnaissance lap, where the driver wasn't even attacking the circuit, then there was a chance that the same behavior could appear at other times of the weekend under similar conditions. And in Formula One, that kind of uncertainty is something no team wants to have. Therefore, after the Australian Grand Prix, McLaren did not treat the accident as a simple isolated incident. The team decided to thoroughly review the way the car managed power delivery in low-grip situations. They also analyzed how the engine maps interacted with the state of the tires and the asphalt conditions in the first laps. Oscar Piastri's accident at the Australian Grand Prix will remain as one of those moments that at first glance seem easy to explain, but that actually hide much more than what the images show. From the outside, everything seemed like a simple mistake on a reconnaissance tour. A car with cold tires, a little too much throttle, and a loss of control. Something that in Formula One we have seen many times. But when McLaren began to calmly analyze what happened, the story changed completely. The telemetry revealed that the car reacted with an aggressiveness that not even the driver himself expected at that moment. The combination of out-of-temperature tires, going over the curb, and too sudden a power delivery generated an instant loss of traction that triggered the impact against the wall. In just a few tenths of a second, a chain of small factors created the perfect scenario for the car to react violently and completely unexpectedly. And although the result was a painful retirement for Piastri in his home race, it also left a very important lesson within McLaren. Piastri's crash was brief, occurred before the race began, and quickly disappeared from the media spotlight. But within McLaren he left something much more important, a technical warning that forced the team to review how its car delivered power in critical situations. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.